Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us for our annual Mayor's Megawatt Challenge Forum. My name is Kathryn Wilson. I'm the manager of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge, a program working with municipalities since 2003 to reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions in their own facilities. We're continuing with our theme of practical pathways to net zero carbon buildings. And today we're moving from plans to actions by exploring the implementation of some of the low carbon plans. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our program sponsor, Enbridge Gas, who have been helping us and our municipalities achieve our objectives. Just some housekeeping items. If you have any questions related to the technology, so non-content related, please enter those into the chat. If you have any questions related to the content, please use the Q&A option. Depending on the nature of the questions, some will be answered live and others in a Q&A session following the panel discussion. We'll also circulate a Q&A document after the event for any questions that we can't get to. And I just wanted to acknowledge with respect the unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that share these lands with us. We're meeting on the traditional homes of many nations, including the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. This meeting is virtual, reaching people across Canada, but we're speaking from lands governed by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit River. It's our hope that the work we do today contributes meaningfully to our collective responsibility as stewards of the environment. So just to briefly look at our members. So we have a wide range of members participating in the program, from large cities to small villages. Some have been with us for many years, 20 years. Others have just joined recently. So some are just beginning down the path to low carbon. Others are well on their way and willing to share what they've learned with others. So no matter what your size or where you are in your journey, there's a place for you in the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge. So just moving to the agenda, after the opening remarks, we'll remind everyone of the results and lessons learned from the Net Zero Ice Rinks pilot, followed by a panel discussion with municipalities that have started implementing the measures recommended in their low carbon plans. They'll share updates on their projects, share lessons learned along the way, so others can build on their success. We'll then discuss some implementation considerations, particularly around electrification and solar PV, followed by new buildings and how to get them right the first time. And then some updates on funding opportunities from Enbridge and others. And I'd now like to turn it over to Ian Jarvis, Executive Director of the Climate Challenge Network, to provide opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Kathryn, and good morning, all of our audience in the West. Great to have you here. We love the national coverage, and this really is a national and North American and a global story we have to share today. I wanted to set the stage with a lot of the conversations we're having in different parts of the country with governments, with utility companies, with building owners, with municipalities, with people who are concerned about these issues across all building types, all building sectors. So next slide, please. So credit to the prescience of the Hamilton Spectator right at the beginning of January 2021, when we were, it seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? But it really isn't. We were so consumed with COVID-19 was coming along, and you see the little caption there, be sure to wash your hands and we'll be fine. But that was the preoccupation back there. Even at that time, this particular cartoonist anticipated maybe more of a financial fallout than we actually saw, imagining that COVID was going to shut things down and we'd see a recession. The financial impact in general was nothing like as bad as was anticipated there. But the third wave was always coming, that climate change, without over-dramatizing, is going to kill more people than COVID did. It's going to cause more economic disruption, more economic hardship, more social dislocation, more migration than anything the world has seen before. So for context, Climate Challenge Network, Mayor's Megawatt Challenge, we're somewhat consumed with the responsibility to take the climate crisis seriously. unlike pandemics, unlike the horrific wars happening in different parts of the world right now, climate change, the climate crisis is not going to come to an end. Our role is how much can we mitigate the effects? To what extent can we reduce the damage? But climate change is not going to go away. Let's go to the next slide, please. And we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we get people's attention? Sometimes it's almost like we're sleepwalking into this crisis. You know, it's absolutely arguable that we're at war. It's a war that we declared on the natural environment, and the natural environment is much bigger and stronger than we are, and it's fighting back. But it's almost like we're sleepwalking into it. You know, we see the devastation in Florida, which in the foreseeable future may become uninsurable and perhaps uninhabitable. And it's visible. We feel it. We see what's happening in Pakistan with air quality now. We see the weather events happening on the west coast of Canada. And somehow the climate thing, though, is invisible. You know, if we spill a bunch of garbage, we can see it. We go clear it up. If we have a leak and the basement's under half an inch of water, we go and fix it. We clear it up. But energy waste, excessive energy use, the pollution of the atmosphere with greenhouse gases, somehow, even though we can see it in these pictures, it hasn't got the same level of consciousness that we have. And we spent a lot of time trying to think, how do we make this real? How do we try to get the message of urgency across to everybody? So that's our challenge. And we welcome all of the members of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge helping us make this real locally, not just within their municipality, but also within their community. So visibility matters and urgency matters. Next slide, please. And the climate challenge would be a challenge in its own right, except that it's triggering the energy transition. We'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And we'll refer to it as the biggest transition in human history. I'm really not quite sure what it looked like when we morphed from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age and all the way through those eras. That's a long time ago. But as we've gone from on the left-hand side of this picture, wind and animal power towards the fossil fuel transition, hydrocarbons were a miracle. Like, you know, now they're the carbon devils, you know, natural gas, oil, coal. But back in the early 1900s, it was a miracle. It lifted millions of people out of poverty. It advanced the economy. It was a very easy transition to make because it was so much more efficient, so much more practical, allowed us to do so many more things. But now we found we can't use fossil fuels anymore. We can't keep burning them because the atmosphere can't take the carbon. It took 100,000 years for the atmosphere to clean itself of the carbon and create oil, gas, and store all of those things deep underground. And now we've unearthed them within essentially 150 years. We've brought them all up again. And we're at the stage now we got to transition into electrification, go back to wind power in a much more efficient form than we had it before. The bottom right-hand corner there is heat recovery chillers, heat pump technology. All of that is the age yet to come. And that transition, the 1900s transition away from wind didn't happen because we ran out of wind. There's always a big push that happened there, which was the convenience of fossil fuels as we transition now into the new world of electrification. It's not that we ran out of fossil fuels, it's that we can't keep burning them. There are two transitional slides up there. One is our friends in Mississauga, and Mississauga say, you know, buildings are the common factor. Buildings will be here at the beginning of the transition and the end of the transition. They're an important part of the conversation. And in the bottom, in our view, we're making clear that boilers and fossil fuel combustion is going to be part of the transition, doing that in the most efficient and practical way possible. But we do not buy into the premise that we got to stop all fossil fuel combustion tomorrow. We simply can't do that. Back in 1900, there were 1.6 billion of us that were managing that transition. Today, there's 8 billion of us that are dealing with this transition. Massive scale that's never been seen by humankind before. It's a major challenge, and one where we'll say repeatedly, municipalities, local governments are playing just the leading role. They're, for us, they're the great hope that we can actually get through this and get it right. Next slide, please. And it's so easy for the world when they first say, yeah, this is a problem, we got to deal with this. And the majority of people now believe that's the case. And we look for silver bullets, don't we? We're so used to that. You know, what will bring this to an end? So whether it's nuclear fusion, you know, whether it's burying carbon capture and storage, maybe we can take all this nasty carbon, pull it out of the atmosphere and bury it under the big plate to the west of British Columbia. All of these ideas around supply side solutions, and we'll argue there are no good supply options facing us right now. We can, from a gas consumption standpoint, everybody is working towards reducing, maybe not eliminating natural gas in the short term, but reducing it. And we do a lot of work with the math around the Ontario Energy Board. You know, when we cut 90% of the natural gas consumption going to buildings, the remaining 10% has to carry the $1 billion investment in all of the gas supply system. Distribution costs will go up precipitously. So the cost of gas is going to become really, really high, whereas essentially the cost of the demand and the cost of the infrastructure that's going to be driving it. It's not clear what will happen to commodity costs with natural gas, but we know that the transmission and the distribution are going to eat us alive as the volumes go way down. We look at the electric side, it's going the other way. Its price is going up because of increasing demand. And there's little that can be done about the residential demand for electricity. The reality is, sooner rather than later, the majority of households will have air source heat pumps. The majority, some will have ground source heat pumps. The majority will have an electric vehicle. That increase in demand for residential neighborhoods is going to be massive. It's going to drive hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in new electrical supply, in new electrical capacity. And that's going to drive the costs up. And particularly, both of these, we're going to see the highest costs on the coldest days of the year. So it's that peak demand time. That peak demand is going to become a major problem because we don't have any practical solutions for that at the moment. Renewable natural gas, green hydrogen, we get excited about all those things. We don't see those volumes making a substantive contribution to the whole picture. The last mile, as I mentioned just a moment ago, this heating demand on the coldest days is going to become very expensive because everybody will want it in cold climates at the same time, and it'll be in limited supply. It'll be driving the bus in terms of how much electrical capacity we need, how much gas capacity we need, and so on. So anything you can do to reduce peak demand, especially heat recovery, ventilation heat recovery, exhaust air heat recovery, even if it looks expensive and the payback doesn't look good right now, it's going to pay dividends once we get to being a winter peaking system, which is going to happen within the next decade. Anything we can do to reduce demand, thermal storage, geothermal, all those things will become substantively higher value, better payback, better returns than they are today. And those are where we should be thinking on a future basis. Future-proofing, risk-proofing, reducing peak demand will be really important. And the final comment, because renewable energy obviously is a big part of this mix, the mining damage. If you track worldwide, the damage being created by mining, not so much in Northern Ontario, where we've got good regulations in place, but in Africa, in China, there's some whole communities being devastated by the effects of mining. So even the good stuff, the renewable energy, the windmills, the solar photovoltaics, the batteries, even those good things have collateral damage attached to them. No good supply options takes us to the next slide, which will be no surprise to anybody who's been part of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge for a while. You know, efficiency comes first. And there is still an enormous, much more than the governing bodies believe, enormous potential for improvements in energy efficiency, which are cost effective, which make all kinds of financial sense, make environmental sense. This, if anybody's new to the MERS, is our typical ski slopes. This is benchmark charts. Every horizontal line is a building. The ones at the top are the most efficient. Kathryn and her team spent their lives studying those to figure out what makes them special, putting it into case studies, best practices, guidelines, checklists that allows the ones at the bottom that in some cases you can see are using 5 times as much energy as the ones at the top, 5 times, that they can use then to improve and move up. And we've published this information before. If we can get everybody not to the left-hand side line there, but just to the middle line, to the top quartile. If all the ones below the top quartile made it to the top quartile, we reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the whole sector by about 35%. This is looking at administration buildings. We've got the same charts as you've seen before for fire stations, for arenas, for community centers, for police stations, for community housing. We got benchmarks, we got standards for everything. We just have to adopt them and work towards meeting them and focus on the less efficient buildings. Next slide, please. And we need to do it at the portfolio level. It's no longer, we just simply don't have time to work building by building by building. We got to look at our whole portfolio. This is a typical run of the electricity use, the thermal energy use, typically natural gas, the total energy use, compared to established targets. So the MERS has developed what's a good practice energy use intensity number for every municipal building type. We've got all those. We struggle a bit with water and wastewater treatment plants because they're a bit industrial, a bit specific. Every other building type we've got a standard for. You can run, this is a typical report that comes up saying, here's what you're using, here's what you should be using if you run what you've got efficiently, here's how much you can save. So the targets are there, and you need to be applying them across the whole portfolio. And the next slide, please. Then the magic of numbers, we've got the analytical tools to say, give us your monthly data, and we can turn it around and tell you not only how much you can save, so you can look, this particular portfolio is looking at saving $443,000 a year and 950 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. But you can see which of your buildings have the biggest opportunity, and you can see which of the energy components is it. Is it baseload electricity? Is it heating, thermal? And that directs you to where your biggest opportunities lie. In other words, you can build your action plan simply around these energy targets, simply based on monthly data. Then you can go deeper into interval gas, interval electric data, all the things that will teach you. But your fair share is if every municipality and every building owner committed to reach that top quartile level, these are the numbers you come up with. And we're saying it's entirely cost effective. There's no financial reason not to do this. It's purely organizational management, knowledge, understanding, reporting, making sure we get there. Next slide, please. So the government wants us to do this, and the government has actually strangely limited power to make things change. So the blue line you see on this chart is actually the federal plan that calls for a 41% decline reduction compared to 2019 of greenhouse gas emissions associated with buildings. And Enbridge Gas and the IESO and our ECDM plans that you all just completed, all of those should be tracking that blue line. The reality is Enbridge's gas supply plan shows that dotted line at the top, that gas used by buildings, in fact, is creeping up every year. We need to acknowledge the fact we're going in the wrong direction. We're hearing reports. We are not on the right trajectory for meeting even the targets that we set already. So we need to change things. We need to fix things. Next slide, please. Similarly with Canada, there's all these bars there, and it's so easy to say, transportation is the gray one at the top, and then the kind of aquamarine color one, that's oil and gas. They're so big. What can we do in buildings? The gold band through the middle there, little vein of gold through the middle of all of this. That's buildings. And that's what the federal government is looking for, like working towards 2030. That's how they see it reducing. And we're reporting the fact that we're not reducing at all. In fact, if anything, we're creeping up a little bit. So we have changes to make. So the energy transition is accompanied by a significant rethink of how collectively we're approaching energy efficiency. Next slide, please. So this, when Gillian, who you know well, and Kathryn and the rest of our team and I, we talk, we feel this very strongly. 2030 is coming. The idea that climate change is the defining issues of our time again, and there's no end in sight, and it's not going to go away. We can only moderate it. But we're absolutely convinced that local governments have a vital role to play. And that's really what today is all about, is helping to frame that leadership opportunity. Governments can set targets. They can get together at COP gatherings. They can talk about whether they're going to get to net zero in 2050 or 2040, but they can't do any of it. They rely entirely on us locally to get things done. Right now, we're going in the direction, and we will miss those targets by a wide margin. We believe if we don't make 2030, we can't make 2040. If we don't make 2040, we can't make 2050, and we are in serious trouble. We could do a whole other one of these forums talking about the nature of the catastrophic consequences of unabated climate change. But that's not what we're here today. We're here today to talk about solutions. But the scale of that catastrophe, we're not sure very many people yet fully comprehend just how bad it's going to become. So think globally. It's a global issue. Act locally. Every municipality has the responsibility and the opportunity not just to fix its own facilities, but also to engage its communities around closing the gap. And we truly believe of all the opportunities out there, this is the biggest one. You're our best friends. We think you've got the biggest leverage to actually make a major difference. And Mayors Megawatt Challenge wants to help in any way it can. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read this to you. You can read it for yourself. But it's a massive undertaking we're heading into. Nothing like it has ever happened before, and it affects everybody on the planet. We're not sure what's going to happen at the federal provincial levels in Canada, what kind of level of commitment there is going to be. And to put it simply, the planet doesn't care. It's not that fussed about whether humanity survives this or not. The planet will keep going strong. And we have to do what we can do individually. We had a healthcare gathering recently where a vice president there said, I wonder about what I'm going to tell my children and my grandchildren. What was I doing during the climate crisis? So this is a major time of opportunity. We talked about municipal leadership. You've got tools that you can work with. They're not infinite. We're doing quite a bit of work with New York City and Local Law 97 and carbon caps. But all of the things you're doing are necessary and vital, and together they're going to get us where we need to go. We've got great allies with FCM. We'll hear from allies, the local utility companies. Those groups exist across the country. They all care. They all have a mandate. They're all looking to improve. And we believe collaboration. Mayors Megawatt Challenge is all about working together on this stuff rather than everybody trying to figure it out individually. Collaboration, we think, is key to success, and we need your help to make collaboration effective, to make it work really well for everybody. Next slide, please. And it's not all doom and gloom. Like I worry about my grandchildren. You see signs of anxiety about COVID to begin with, missing the end of school, now getting into the climate. These are difficult times, but it's not all doom and gloom. These are my happiest times. That's me smiling in the middle there. The leaders, you have leaders in the municipal sector. This is just one group of them. You've got champions. We got success stories. Like, we know how to do this. It's not like we got to find a new way of doing things. We know how to do it. We just have to make the time, make the commitment, find the resources, make the business case, do all the good things. And every year when I get to be part of a gathering like this, celebrating successes, that's the happiest time. These are not all of our leaders. These are the ones that were part of this particular group, but you are a leader. If you're on this call, you care enough to be taking part in this conversation, and you are a leader. You're a champion. You're going to create success stories. Please share them with us, and we'll share them with everybody else, and together we will get through this. Next slide, please. There's my transition to Kathryn to talk about what we're up to with particularly arena facilities, but many of you will have seen this slide before. But the tagline of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge is leading by example. And here we are today. How do we go from commitments, from planning to action, to results, to beginning that upward spiral where together we can see everything builds on everything else, and we're making real progress, and we're starting to work towards our targets. So thanks for bearing with me at the start of this whole thing. Now this all degenerates into work. There's work to be done. And again, thank you all so much for being part of it.
Thanks so much, Ian. We'll be getting to our panel discussion shortly here. I just wanted to set the stage and sort of remind everyone where we're coming from with our work on ice rinks. So the original pilot was designed to really bring in net zero best practices, not really yet adopted by the municipalities or many of them. So things like integrated design teams, life cycle costing, capital planning aligned with asset management, and zero overtime planning. So a feasibility study was developed for each participating rink, which provided a high-level technical solution to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including an outline of potential measures using life cycle financial analysis in an incremental overtime approach. The solutions were aligned with the individual municipal timelines, so targets, urgency in getting to net zero, and with everything aligned with the capital and asset management plans. So this is just a reminder of the municipalities and facilities that participated in the pilot, and we have 3 of them joining for our panel discussion today. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Just to remind everyone of the roadmap that we follow towards low carbon. So really, there's 4 areas, always starting with energy efficiency, improving operations and equipment efficiency through optimizing the use of existing equipment and getting buildings to run as efficiently as possible. So adjusting set points and scheduling systems to run only when needed, for example, really to bring down the building load as much as possible. And that'll be followed by heat recovery to put as much waste heat as possible back into the building. And we'll get into an in-depth discussion about this shortly. The next stage is integrating renewables to cover the remaining demand and leaving carbon offsets, carbon credits as the last resort. We've integrated the idea of zero over time because realistically, not everyone can get to net zero carbon immediately, especially in existing buildings. So the approach really plans the improvements when equipment replacements are needed and when capital renewal is scheduled. So focusing really on energy efficiency first, and then when existing equipment comes to end of life, you have low carbon options available to replace the equipment instead of going with business as usual or like for like replacements. We also follow an integrated design approach. So we really believe that an integrated process is key to achieving the savings outcomes that we're all looking for. So collaboration, knowledge sharing, in-depth networking between industry, leaders, consultants, municipal decision makers really does lead to the best solutions and savings that can be measured at the meter. So the overall findings. So net zero is technically and financially feasible in municipal ice rinks, especially if it's done in stages, as I mentioned. So when systems are at end of life, you have a long-term plan in place using a staged approach. So there's always a low carbon solution when that equipment comes to end of life. Just to remind everyone of the findings, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. We had a range of different ice rinks from 1 pad, 2 pad, 4 pad rinks, some seasonal operations, some 12 months operation. So as a result, you see a wide range of energy use intensities ranging from 26.5 up to 40, and quite a range in the thermal as well. All the facilities were targeting zero gas use except for 1, which was really only focused on operational measures. This was using a 2019 baseline year for a full year of normal operations prior to COVID. See a similar story for greenhouse gas emissions from a high of 628 tons to a low of 119. The emissions reductions range from 99 down to 79, with the exception of the one only looking at operational. We've done many low carbon studies since then, and the results are consistent. So most municipal ice rinks can achieve at least 90% reductions following the approach. And not surprisingly, the results showed that the majority of the savings opportunities are found in the refrigeration plant. No big surprise for ice rink facilities, followed by heating and ice resurfacing measures. And the additional studies that we've done are consistent with this. So the refrigeration plant, definitely an area of focus in all ice rink facilities. In terms of high impact measures, we found the measures with the most impact in terms of greenhouse gas reductions is adding heat recovery to the existing refrigeration plant. The average emission savings from this measure was 89 tons, so almost double that of the next measure. So the average emission reductions were about 34%. So again, and this is consistent with the studies that we've done since then. So high impact measures, heat recovery, and that'll be the main focus of our discussion today, our panel discussion, the municipalities that have started down the path to implementing the heat recovery. Just quickly touching on the financials. So we use life cycle cost analysis to estimate the total cost of the project, really looking to find the solutions that provide the lowest overall cost of ownership. So using, net present value is the key to evaluating the options instead of just using simple payback. So using the net present value is critical to making the business case for the low carbon alternative. In many cases, even though the initial outlay of costs are higher for low carbon alternatives compared to the business as usual, the net present value over the life of the equipment is often more positive than the business as usual. So making that low carbon alternative more financially attractive in the long run. And this is particularly true for refrigeration plant measures. A number of recommendations coming out of the study that are applicable to every ice rink. And again, I won't read them off here. We do have lots of information on our website, recordings from previous webinars where we go a bit more in depth into these. But again, the big story is heat recovery is one of the critical and often best measures you can start with to get to low carbon. I am now going to turn it over to Amandeep just to give a little technical background on heat recovery before diving into the panel discussion.
Thanks, Kathryn, and good afternoon, everyone. There's some good mornings as well, I believe, from other part of the Canada. I think that conceptually, it's pretty simple that you have a heat available from your ice plant that and generally is being rejected to outside through a cooling tower. Now, when we try to decarbonize these buildings or these facilities, we have a very good heat source that's available to us, which we can actually use to supplement the existing heats in the building where heat's actually needed in the building. So in case of air handling units, your dehumidifiers that you use for facilities, your AHUs, any fan coil units, domestic hot water, flood water heatings, anywhere you need hot water or energy that is currently being produced by the ice rink, you can actually leverage that and then put that back into the building. And that's what's going to be part of the discussions today. We have some of those examples through case studies, but and there are certain lessons learned as well is through that process. So consider when you're looking at your sort of decarbonization goal, like consider each and every element of the building and see how you can tie that together to your ice plant, and also consider matching those loads closely. And that's generally done through making sure you get a hourly data profile on when your ice plant is working versus when you actually need heat in the building, because mapping those two out is a critical in ensuring that you have a heat source and a sink available and they're aligned to do that. If they're not aligned, First, try to do that through operations. If it's not practical, then you could also consider some sort of a thermal storage that would help you reduce those hours of gaps between heat source when it's available versus heat sink when it's needed. So, and we'll have more conversation today about this through the case studies as well. So let me quickly introduce you to the panelists. So we're going to cover 3 case studies today. We're also, and I'll introduce the panelists as we go through the conversation and case studies. We'll start with Mount Joy, which is the first case study with Waji and his team, and then we'll go to Mold Masters, where we have Wenky and Georgie from Houghton Health will be representing, and then we'll also be supported by Devin and Jay from Simco for their individual projects. And then I'll also, in the end, last but not the least, we'll go to Town of Caledon for their interesting project, which also includes ice rink and heat recovery.
Thanks, Amandeep. Waji, do you maybe want to go first? You can introduce yourself, and Amanda. I think Amanda's here.
Yes, definitely, if you can go first.
Thanks.
Oh, actually, Kathryn, what I will do is I'll get them to introduce as we do the case study. So
Okay.
maybe go to
Yep, we
go
can
to
do
the
that.
next slide,
We can do
because
that.
then
Yep.
people are gonna forget who was who.
That makes sense.
So we're talking about Mount Joy here, and Waji, let's start with the introduction and for the audience, and maybe give us an overview of this project. How did you guys start it, and what were you trying to accomplish through these through this project?
Sure, Amandeep. Hello, everyone. My name is Waji Sohail, and currently I'm working as the project manager in the corporate energy team with the city of Markham. I am the project manager leading this project, so I can walk you folks through what we have achieved so far and what are the lessons learned, which I think would be the important take for many on this call. But before I get started on that, I just wanted to also introduce Amanda Martin, who's on the call. Amanda is the corporate energy manager with the city of Markham. And as we talk about the kind of the vision of our energy team or the goals that we have set for the net zero initiatives and the strategy that is in place, Amanda is kind of at the core of all of that. She's put a lot of efforts in that. It's almost like a one-person team when she started this, and now it's a team that has expanded quite a bit. So we are all leading these initiatives now, which were initially conceptualized and thought of mainly by Amanda. So just wanted to introduce, and because of her experience, I might leverage her expertise to answer some of the questions.
Thank you, Reggie. And can you walk us through your
Yep.
facility and then explain what were your goals for this?
Yes, absolutely. So the facility, I mean, it's an ice rink facility. It's a 60,000 square foot facility with the ice rink being about 20,000 square foot. It also has an indoor soccer field and an outdoor soccer field, which also has a dome. It's an inflatable dome, which is used in the winter months to continue the soccer field activities. As well as there is a second floor, second level in this building, which is a bunch of offices, some washrooms, change rooms, and some rooms available to the community if they wanted to book for their events. So that's the facility. From a goals perspective, the goals, as you have highlighted, as they highlighted on the slide, we are the goal was to reduce 60% of the energy consumption and 80% of the GHG emissions. And this really started when we partnered with Enerlife and through the MMC program and participated in the cohort study. The study, I think, was very detailed. It gave us a preliminary roadmap to how we can achieve these retrofits, and helped us establish what are the realistic energy reduction and GHG reduction goals that we can set ourselves up with. So really, we took that the outcome of that study, and then we made a business case internally using a lot of findings of the study. and it was well supported also by grants at that point, because the Infrastructure Canada's GICB grant, which we applied for and we were successful in securing that, pays 80% of the project funding, which is massive. So I think that aligned that along with the business case elements from the study that was done helped us put this forward and work on this project.
Awesome. Just a context for everyone. I think this work is currently is happening. So this work hasn't completed yet. So maybe give us a timeline on that, when you expect it to complete and start to see the savings on this project.
Yes, sure. At this point, we have completed the detail design and the equipment procurement. I would say about 70 to 80% of equipment is on site. From a construction perspective, we have completed the lighting upgrades. So that's the retrofit of the existing fluorescent fixtures to LEDs. And we are working on the HVAC measures right now as we speak. The goal to complete all the construction and commissioning activities would be August of 2025, after which we have a 6-month period of measurement and verification.
Okay, awesome. All right, let me continue. Kathryn, can you go to the next slide? So one thing when we were reviewing, I like this, and about the project is that how you guys tackle sort of individual components of your systems and try to sort of decarbonize all of them, right? So as you could see here, maybe you can explain what was the thinking process behind it, and then and we'll walk through the scope of work quickly.
Sure, yes. We can go through a little more detail into the initial steps, but once we had an approved project, and I'll talk about the execution strategy for this one a bit later on. But this is our pilot design build project with the design build firm. So lots of learnings there for us. But once we had a firm, once we had a contract signed, the first step really was to go through and a detailed investment grade audit. And that was to validate the measures that were initially thought would be the ECMs implemented. So first was to validate all the measures. And once that phase was complete, we really understood from a practical perspective, what would be the measures, what would be the eventual scope, schedule, and cost of the project. So what you're showing here is our existing versus new system. I'm not going to read through all of it, but essentially the ice plant, which was end of life, we are planning to replace that ice plant with more energy efficient ice plant. We're adding VFD brine pumps. And we're also adding 2 main heat exchangers. We are adding an ammonia desuperheater, which is utilizing the heat from the heat from the from the ammonia gas, and it is using that to heat up the domestic cold water, which will be then supplemented with a hybrid electric air source heat pump. Also, we have a heat recovery heat exchanger, which will be utilized to preheat the air that will be supplied to the ice rink. So this is on the ice plant side. On the domestic hot water side, as I mentioned, so we'll have the desuperheater, which will take the incoming domestic cold water from 50 Fahrenheit to 110 Fahrenheit. And then we have a hybrid electric heat pump, which will supplement and get the temperature to 140 Fahrenheit. We also, in most cases, you will see that we are keeping our existing equipment in place to act as a backup. So the gas-fired boiler that we have today, it's a pretty efficient condensing gas boiler. So that will stay in place. For the air handling units, we were, based on the recovered heat, waste heat, we were able to supply that to the arena air handling unit, and that was through a hot water glycol heating coil. And that will basically be sufficient for the winter months, but then in the whenever we want to supplement that, then we will rely on the electrical heating coil that we will have in place, and that would necessarily be the backup. Also, and I speak for both of our fan systems right now, we don't have VFDs. Um, we don't have the dampers are not controlled by the BES. We don't have CO2 sensors or temperature and humidity sensors, and we are adding them as part of this retrofit. We can go to the next slide.
Yeah, next slide, please. So I think, yeah, though what I kind of see is that you tackle this. So just for the folks out there, the heat recoveries from the ice plant, conceptually, what's available to you? You're putting that heat recovery to your, in this case, your handling units. And then I think what we had previously at the conversations that when you looked at your model, there wasn't enough heat recovery available to supplement other units. And then you decided to use that exhaust heat recovery
Yes.
as a means to offset that load, and then also use air source heat pump for additional sort of decarbonizing that gas piece into the air source heat pump system.
Right. It kind of goes back to the chart that we were looking at, right? It started with the optimization. So, and there are some examples in the lessons learned, where we applied the optimization in the refrigeration plant, but it was really improving the efficiency of what we have today, followed by seeing how much waste heat do we have without inefficiently running the compressors longer. Let's see what's the true waste heat value we have and where can we utilize that. Unlike what we anticipated initially, we didn't have enough waste heat to supplement all the heating systems in the building. So we used that strategically for the ice rink as well as the domestic hot water. And then going to the third avenue was we utilize air source heat pumps and we utilize energy recovery ventilators to recover as much, to basically make the processes as efficient as possible.
Great.
Go
ahead, sorry.
Go on.
No, go ahead.
Here, I was just going to, because we talked about the air handling units. For the rooftop unit, we have the similar strategy. Again, not enough heat in the from the refrigeration plant. So we again opted for the VRF air source heat pump, which are very efficient. To start with, they also helped us. We are serving multiple rooms with this VRF air source heat pump, and if we have the ability to control the temperature of these rooms independently, and even actually heat and cool simultaneously if need be. And every opportunity we had to replace an exhaust fan with an ERV, so that one, it can serve the exhaust purposes. Second, it can recover the exhaust heat, and it can utilize that, and we use that too for the supply air for two of our fan systems. So I think that was another solution that helped our savings on, theoretically speaking still, that helped our savings a lot. From a BES side, the current status is we only have the refrigeration plant on BES. So going forward, we are adding the heating systems and lighting to the BES. Also, we are implementing smart strategies, smart control strategies for scheduling and for set points. It's more based on the occupancy and activity, so that we can optimize, again, the operation from a BS perspective.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Baji. And Amanda, jump in anytime if you have anything to add to this. Let's continue, Kathryn, with respect to time. I just want to make sure we cover all three case studies. There's so much to cover in these case studies, and I just want to make sure everybody get the opportunity to do that. So we talked about this in terms of your sort of project schedules, financials. One thing I want to cover, I think you mentioned that, and these are your goals, which we kind of highlighted, but that cost piece that initially it kind of jumped in. I think you had a lessons learned on that, and maybe something that you can share with people or municipalities who are actually going through the same case of applying this funding. How do they ensure that they get the right numbers in place for these kind of?
Yes, absolutely. There are two lessons here. One I'll start on the cost piece and then talk about the whole design build philosophy. On the cost piece, by the time the measures were finalized, we realized that scope changed, and as a result of scope change, and as a result of unprecedented price escalation and inflation, our pre-IGA project cost estimate changed by about 300,000. So we realized this after the completion of phase one. So the lesson really here is until we have a completed, I would say, a level ASHA level 3 or investment grade audit, and we have, and whoever consultant you have, unless you have completed a 20 to 30% design, and there is ability to actually, once the scope is finalized, once your basic design is in place, there is ability to go out and get real-time pricing for equipment and construction. I think until that point, there should be enough contingency that each project should carry, and cash allowance as well for the unknowns that would be faced. We did that, and that definitely helped us because we did see a significant jump from 2.5 to 2.8. So our contingency that was in place, it helped. Another thing which ties into this is the whole design build philosophy. We learned from it, this, as I mentioned, this is our pilot project. The learning there mainly was on education and awareness. So even going into a design build project, if you're going in with a scope that is not prescriptive, when you haven't completed your investment grade audit, you haven't completed your 30% design, there are always going to be changes, possible changes in scope, schedule, and cost. So we should keep that in mind. And the way the design build contracts should be structured is should be a phased design build, where you have a firm price for your first phase of the investment grade audit and 30% design. And then there should be room for a contract amendment. Once you have a finalization of scope, schedule, and cost, the contract should be amended at that point as per the findings, and then you proceed forward to the detailed design and construction phase.
Thanks, Haji. I just want to make sure we also leave some time for questions. There are a few of them coming in, but let me cover the next few slides. And I think we covered those. And Kathryn, can you go to the next slide? So this is just kind of a schematic for everyone to consider, but we already touched on that, is that you have a new ice plant at the bottom of the screen. You can see that blue is everything is new, and
that's
then
all new.
Yeah, new desuperator, which provides the heating for your domestic hot water, and then you have a two glycol heat exchanger, which provides the heating for your air handling units, right? And then your existing cooling tower still remains at this point, which is
yes, it's 2019, yeah. So we are not changing that one. Yes.
Right. And let's go to the next slide, Kathryn. And this is the one example of your existing systems, which I kind of liked about it, is that you didn't completely kind of gutted the system and put a new system. You actually retrofitted it and decarbonized that with that solution. So your current system had the sort of the furnace heater, and then dampers, and then no exhaust heat recovery. And then you were able to change that, right? To maybe you can quickly walk us through that process.
As you said, David, the philosophy will always look at our assets that are coming to end of life and come up with a plan that one decarbonizes the existing status for us. We get to reduce GHG emissions, we get to reduce energy consumption, at the same time renew the equipment that is truly end of life. And it doesn't mean a complete overhaul of everything that we have in place. So here in this schematic, which correlates to the next one, is we had an existing gas-fired furnace, and there is an existing mixed air damper system.
Other next.
And
then next one.
Yeah, we can go to the next one.
Next slide. That kind of shows you what. There you go. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, so here you can see we kept the existing duct heater because it still has some life left, and it acts as a backup really. And what we did was we weren't able to connect this to the recovered heat from the ice plant, but instead we went for the VRF technology. We have an air source heat pump connected to the DX coil there. Right now the plan is to just use this for heating, but if we ever need to, we can also use the same technology for cooling as well by using the reversing valve. The dampers, which were end of their life, and also the insulation in the plenums needed a retrofit. So we did that. We are installing new dampers, and as I mentioned before, We replaced the exhaust fan with the ERV. So that now that would be working for the exhaust of all the change rooms there, and at the same time, it will supply like a preheated air to this fan system.
Awesome. Thank you. That takes us to some of the important lessons learned, and one of them was around calibrating sort of your energy model with the real data. And I think you stressed on that earlier as well. And I personally vouch that approach because in past we have been using energy models as a tool, but now we have real data from the buildings. Maybe can you walk us through your process working with your consultants? How were you able to leverage the power of the existing data within your building to calibrate these models, which actually present a true story about your building?
Sure. Yeah. So to keep it simple, essentially, as they deep dived in the investment grade audit phase, the first step was to collect whatever data was available, and luckily we had some good data available. So we had interval meter data, which helped. We also had we also have a couple of submeters. One was for the refrigeration plant. One was for the outdoor dome. So we took the interval data for that. For the refrigeration plant, we actually had really good trend logs, which we got right from the system, the Simco system. So that was utilized. So combining all the data that was available, and also they did the consultant design builder. We're working with Ameresco. They also did a lighting audit. So combined with this and then talking to the operators, because they truly wanted to understand the operating conditions. And I think that is one of the key partner the data with how the system facility is operating. I think doing all of that at the core helped them. And there was enough data, they didn't need to add any additional meters or sub-meters because of the data that was already available. But gathering all this data helped them create end use profiles. And then they were able to create a model, create an energy model, really understanding which system is drawing how much energy and what measures really suit this facility. The good news was that once the model was created in the HAP software, the correlations were actually very well within the acceptable limits. The deviations were very minimal, which assured that the energy model is talking to the utility data for our baseline year 2019. So some of these steps actually helped us a lot, and we're able to find some of the learnings and lessons that we had, which we had. One was finding that the outdoor dome, which was originally thought to be a separate meter altogether because it has a separate gas meter, it was actually not fed off a separate meter. It was being fed from the same building. So our baseline had to be adjusted for that. But that finding came through once we started looking at data at a granular level. Also, really analyzing the refrigeration plant data made us realize that there is a lot of optimization that can be done on the current operation, which was improved ice temperature set points, improved return brine set points, as well as finding that the suction pressure.
Kathryn, sorry, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, Waji's covering the next slide, and I'll bring Amanda as well into the equation. Amanda, if you want to put your thoughts together, I'm going to ask you about how was your overall experience? You've lived through this from start to end. What would be your recommendations to people who are actually starting on this journey? So, sorry, Waji,
No,
you were
that's okay.
explaining some of the lessons learned as a part of the project.
Yes. So one of the other lesson learned, which there's some verbiage on this slide, was around the suction pressure, which were running below their typical, which essentially simply means that there is less ammonia, there's less pressure going into the compressors, which makes the compressors, it creates a sub cooling condition, and it makes the compressors work harder. There was no impact on the quality. But the compressors were not running at an optimized state. So going forward, when we change the setting back to the typical suction pressure, which should be around 24 psi, the expectation is the compressors will be running for lesser time, which also correlates to the finding that we don't have enough waste heat energy to supplement all the HVAC or all the other system needs in the building. So some of these findings came about after the detailed investment grade audit was performed.
Awesome. Amanda, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Waji's covered a lot of it, and he is definitely more able to provide the detailed background on this specific project since he is the project manager. But from an overall strategy perspective, I would highly recommend this process. I think it's gone very well, and I'm glad we were engaged early on to participate in that cohort study and learn from each other and learn from the committee of experts that Enerlife put together. That really laid the groundwork for us to apply for grant funding and kick off all of these pilot projects and build on scopes based on the lessons learned that came out of that first project. We went and completed 3 more community center studies and 3 or 4 fire station studies, and kept learning all through that process of what key data points do we need when we're undertaking these studies, and what are things we need to investigate, including the electrical infrastructure. That's been a big one. And then developing a strategy from there. So now that we started to see commonalities between studying community centers and studying fire stations, and we're able to apply that learning journey knowledge to other similar facilities to get rules of thumb of how we should proceed if we're looking to decarbonize those other facilities. We still need to do detailed audits, but at least we know where we're headed. And when we see that equipment come up for replacement and life cycle, we know what types of considerations we need to include in the budgets and the scopes of work, so that the costs and complications in doing some of these, especially electrification projects, are captured and budgeted for.
Thanks, Amanda.
And it
And I
also, sorry,
Yeah,
to
good.
one last point is it enabled me to also hire and grow the team. So now I have a whole crew of experts who can help lead this across the city.
So we're looking for more of these examples and case studies to share in the future. And one thing, if you for the audience, if you haven't picked up, and it's going to be repeated throughout this case study, is to use your existing data, like whatever the data you have available, use that data to define your process of decision making. And that data exists in most cases. If it doesn't exist, you can data log it and try to use the empirical data in your analysis, because that's going to provide you a better results and better outcome in all the cases, other than assumptions or calculations. Thank you both. This was really helpful. Let me move on to the second case study we have today, which is the Mold Monster complex. And I also want to notice, please keep sending your questions, and we do have experts on the line who are actually responding to your questions. We have people from SEMCO who are responding to your questions, and throughout this conversation, we'll take some of these questions as well. However, we'll address all of them through communication after the forum. But please send your questions, and you will expect some of the responses also coming from the experts. Let me take you to the Mold Master Sports Complex. We have Venki and Georgie. You can see them probably on your screen. Maybe you guys want to introduce yourself and then talk about Mold Monster Complex a bit.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon for all the folks out there. I go by Venki, and I'm the senior analyst of energy management, and this is Georgie. I'm Georgie Christoph. I'm the manager of capital projects for the town of Halton Hills, and we work collaboratively together to implement the low carbon design options through our capital programs. And that project was one of the items within that program. Yeah, absolutely. So getting a brief about this facility, it's pretty much an old facility. Like it was built on 1970, and then an addition was done on 2013. Was a 4-ring ice pad arena, and it is a LEED Silver certified building. How and why this building was selected because this is one of the major consumers of energy and GHG emissions for the town. So as Ian mentioned in the initial, the portfolio energy targets from Mayor's Megawatt, that's the turnkey for this project. So when we get into the background, like one of the major consumers, okay, so there have to be a lot of projects which has to be focused on this building. So since the town has an aim of net zero GHG emissions by 2030, so it is really aggressive targets. So if we need to achieve that, the first building which we need to focus is the Mall Master, and we have another one more building which was part of the cohort, that was Acton Arena. So since Mall Master has the potential of savings, so we started off that. So we did like few of the works which has been already completed. One is the low e-ceiling one. And the second one, which is in progress, is like the dehumidification process and the ice plan. And there are HVAC replacement, which is in progress. And when moving on to the next slide, Georgie will explain about all the technicalities and how it is working and what is the strategy behind it.
Yeah, can we get, sorry, Kathryn, go. I have a couple of questions for you guys on when you thank you, Rinky, for giving an update on and how you guys use the targets as to shortlist the savings potential on your buildings, and this was presented to your council based on. Did you guys had any funding like Monjoy? Was there any funding for your project allocator for this, or this was done solely through capital planning cost and everything else? Like were you guys part of the GIC funding?
The initial project was developed the part of a cohort from the Mayor's Megawatt. So it had a brief report. Then we dig in deep into a third-party consultant, have an analysis of the building about the strategies, how much we can save and what are the costs aspected to that. So based on that report, it has moved forward for the capital planning.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, as well. Yeah, we got some incentives as well for as a part of this project. The CCRF fund. Okay,
there are some incentives as well. So this scope of the work, maybe let's now go to the next slide, Kathryn. So, and this scope of work, as you mentioned, you had currently 4 ice rinks and 2 ice plants in this building, and this scope of work for the initial phase is to on the ice plant is focused on those planned or pad A and B, and the C and D is the new side of it, right? So maybe Georgie, if you can walk us through some of the details about the heat recovery measures you were able to implement recovering the heat, and then we'll talk about some of the lessons learned in the process through that project.
Yes. So as part of our regular capital program, the dehumidifiers were due for life cycle replacement, and we want to build on that replacement based on the design studies that have been completed for the buildings, and move away from like-for-like replacement and implement energy efficiency measures. And as part of that process, we choose from one of the multiple design options provided as part of the study done to replace the existing dehumidifiers with the existing gas-fired dehumidifiers with new hydronic heating, and implement ammonia heat pump, a heat recovery option to the existing ice plant. That will be the source for the dehumidifier. And that's how the project was implemented as part of the capital program, but including some carbon reductions options as part of our goal to achieve the net zero by 2030. And when the design was, the system has been under consideration, the run hours have been reviewed for the ice plant, and the equipment has been selected that will generate heat for the dehumidifier. And further, due to the expected misalignments of the loads, when, for example, the dehumidifier may need the heat away the heat pump will produce, we added a couple more options that we can use as a thermal storage or a heat sink which is the preheat for the domestic hot water. You implement a boiler to preheat that, and as well to heat the flood water for the ice rinks. And further, as a backup, as science, if again, it's in conditions, we implemented a connection from the existing building system, the building heating system, to the new hydronic loop that was implemented to inject heat into the loop in the winter times, or should the heat pump doesn't generate, or there's not enough capacity, or the rink operation, compressor operation doesn't align with the demand of the dehumidifier. So we can inject heat from the building heating towards the system, or vice versa as needed.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point, and it's probably an observation for folks on the line to note. With ice rinks, there's always a challenge to match the load that heat sort of rejected versus the heat sink. Like, where are you gonna sink the heat, what you reclaim from the ice plant, and that match. And we'll see that in the Caledon, how they were lucky to have a pool beside them. But in cases where you don't have that exact matching, that's where you got to find as many sources as you could to extract that heat and not sort of let that heat go waste. And in your case, you have the dehumidifiers, which are now sort of decarbonized from gas-fired to hot water to glycol system, which is fed by this ammonia heat pump system. And then you also added these two other elements. I think you also touched on now, as a part of your recommissioning exercise, you're also looking at as that there's still opportunity to further use your existing loop as a medium. Can you maybe walk us through what you're trying to do now with that final sort of commissioning of this project?
Yeah, so the project, we completed construction, and the system is operational, and the ammonia heat pump is generating and is operating as expected, and generates 160 Fahrenheit glycol solution, which is what was designed for. But for example, the ammonia, the dehumidifier requires 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So we, as I mentioned, we do have excess heat, and that's why we implemented all these additional options to where we can absorb that heat. However, since we start running the system, we encounter a situation where none of those have a demand, which means the domestic has no demand, the flood water boilers have no demand, and but the heat pump, in this case, will be satisfied, we're not going to run. So we're in the process of optimizing the system, and the way that we're currently looking how to extend the run hours and make the system more efficient and extract more heat from when it's available based on the ice plant running hours, is actually reversing and playing with the temperature of the main building heating loop, and making them lower than the heat pump, and using the building loop as a heat sink. So the heat pump can, when the heat pump has run hours, but there's no demand, so we can use the building loop as a heat sink and basically inject the heat into the building piping in the hydronic system, and in which basically we can store it there. And once we need that heat, but for example, the compressor for the ice plants are not operation because there's no demand, or there's demand for one of the other system, we can actually eject that system, that heat from the building loop back to the heat recovery glycol system, to the dehumidifier or to the other plants. So, and that's part of the current ongoing optimization stage that we are currently at.
Thanks, Georgie, and we will look forward to the results in the fall, and then this will definitely become a case study with everybody is looking forward to it. Let's go to some of the lessons learned. Kathryn, next slide, please. Maybe Georgie and Ranky, if you can sort of, what were some of the biggest lessons learned in this, and how would you do it differently if you were to do this on another facility?
So what we learn as and I think they mentioned the previous case study, is it's really important to have the proper measuring data, to have proper metering, the proper run hours of your equipment, which in our case, we didn't have so much detailed data. So it was based on assumptions and record run hours, which gonna do basically to create a real profile to see when new load is available, but to monitor in the system that you're intending to use when their load is what is demand from them as well, and to create a proper profile to see when you can generate heat and when you can actually discharge it to the systems, and properly size the equipment to actually come up with the proper optimized size that the system will, in this case, will work. So that's something I would encourage everybody to consider, proper metering and monitoring of equipment. The thermal storage, as part of our design, we did review to introduce a separate thermal storage tanks, but due to capital cost restrictions and pressures, we decided to go to use, as I mentioned, the building heating as an option that eventually we can use that if needed, and which now we're actually in the stage that we have to use it because it's needed based on the misalignment between the generated heat and the demand. And to match the, let's say, for example, the ammonia heat pump and the size that should be properly reviewed with the first item with available capacity, and you can ensure to have the proper turn down ratios. So to be properly sized. And again, so the intent is to extract the maximum run hours and efficiency of the system. And yes, the continuous monitoring and verification and measurement and verification is needed to install dedicated meters for real-time operating monitoring and troubleshooting and system optimization. It's really helpful at the stage where we are when we're trying to optimize the system and the run hours. You need data. You need to see the temperatures in and out. You need to see the flows. You need to see the run hours of the equipment, so you can create the profiles and you can provide sequence operation for summer, spring operation, winter operation, as those are actually different. And if you want to really have optimized system, not that it cannot operate without them. Team collaboration from project inceptions. It's need the operators, designers, and equipment manufacturer to work together to better understand the specifics of the buildings, as each building has specifics, how it operates, what their demands are. So everything could be sized with in mind how this specific place operates. And the data logging for heat sink and rejection coordination. It's, as I mentioned, we can monitor and log to see based on the temperature and based on the demand of different systems like domestic hot water, flood water. Again, if you have, when it satisfies, then you can choose where to direct the heat or an excess heat and how to extract it as well. And another consideration is to ensure that your engine room, like the refrigeration room, is code compliant. As once you start upgrading and attaching items from your system, there is as mentioned, this building is a bit older, and there's a new exit requirement, ventilation requirements. Even if they're not part of your original design, those should be implemented and be part of your project. So that should be accounted in your capital budget.
Thanks, George. I don't know, Devin, if you have, from Simcoe's perspective, if you have anything to add because you guys been part of these projects and eventually comes to you to fix these things, because you have a bigger fish to fry with these bigger ice machines and that coordination piece, and it's getting more and more challenging with this now. Earlier you were just there as an ice making sort of company, and now it's like you make the ice, but I want the heat from it. So how do you see that challenge being presented to you guys, and what are some of the lessons that you are advising your clients to take away from these case studies?
Yeah, we've been involved in doing heat recovery from ammonia systems for basically since the inception. So we've done quite a lot of this, particularly when it comes to lower grade heat integration around 95. The kind of offering of an ammonia heat pump into the Canadian refrigeration market, specifically for arenas, was a bit of a newer implementation that was relatively easy to prefabricate in an offsite facility and just put it in. Some of the difficulties we encountered with an existing facility was simply fitting the equipment through the door. For this one, we had to split the package into two independently designed systems and then fit them together on site. So that definitely had some execution challenges associated with it. But I mean, these systems, they're relatively well understood. We've got about 15 of them throughout Canada. They use off-the-shelf refrigeration components that are relatively easily accessed through a refrigeration services provider. And they're certainly efficient. When we looked at the difference between a Freon heat pump operating in this facility versus an ammonia heat pump, it was twice the efficiency. So approximate COP of a Freon version was around 2.7, and an ammonia heat pump approximately 6. So it can move twice the energy for the same amount of input. So a really big difference there. One of the things that we touched on here was the turn down of the heat pump. And one of the specifications that wasn't available was that specific turn down. So when we went to, size this equipment, we sized it for the peak. And without having that thermal storage available either on the cold side with something like a glycol ice battery to draw from whenever heat was demanded, but not necessarily in the ice plant, or having enough thermal storage on the high side so you could discharge heat whenever heat was available and have it stored for future use. So having those misalignment in loads is certainly a challenge. Again, like you guys had said, the metering data is something that's pretty critical to understand, when is your refrigeration plant running? And if you don't have supervisory control over the ability to, for example, if you have a big load calling, and your ice plant is not, you could look at overcooling your ice surface by a degree or two so that you can satisfy those heat loads using the heat recovery. So if you're not integrated well from a controls perspective, having that thermal storage is key.
Thanks, Deol. This is helpful. And again, I'm repeating myself, but if you haven't picked the theme here, is the conversations kind of eventually goes to use the real data in the building and put a strategic meters that you would need them not only to document or do the MNV on these projects, but also to commission these projects, because as they get complicated with that heat sink and source, you need to make sure that you have enough when your source is available and when your heat sink is available, and how much of heat you actually need at which particular hour. That's the sort of the artwork that you need to do ahead of time with your consultants, with your contractors, and be part of that team that would help you kind of deliver those projects so you don't eventually run into issues. And thermal storage is going to be part of that, but that decision-making process will let you know whether you actually need it or not. Kathryn, let's quickly do the last slide on this. Thanks, Devin, again. So we talked about a few of the steps, and maybe Rinks, you can help us. So these are some of the other steps you're doing to further decarbonize this building, and this is sort of work's happening as we speak.
Absolutely. The couple of items like which you mentioned on the slide is one is the makeup air units. So currently, the building operates around 17 DX coil with natural gas heating. So that's been getting replaced by a hybrid system. So that's the one piece that might happen on in 2025. And another one is the exhaust heat recovery, which is another piece, which even considered as a small piece, but it's in terms of decarbonization, it's really important. Another one important thing which we are looking into is the BAS system. We are trying to make an unified interface for the whole town. So we are currently working with the City of Toronto, as Amandeep introduced us to the City of Toronto to have a chat with them, how they implemented, what systems they have. So it will help us to optimize the sequence of operation, as Georgie mentioned, the different systems, they need to talk to each other. For instance, most of the arenas has a scheduling system. So if the scheduling system can talk to the lighting and the HVAC system, so that will be a great energy saver for all these kind of buildings. So all these optimization is a huge potential for saving opportunity. And another one more thing which is in progress is the electric ice resurface. Kind of Samboni is coming in next year. So these are all the steps we have taken further down to decarbonize that building. So we'll reach the target by 2030.
Awesome. We're looking forward to those savings results and presenting this case study again. Thank you again. Let me jump to our last but not the least case study, Caledon East Community Complex. I welcome Christina. Can you first introduce yourself and then maybe provide us a background on the project?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Christina Guido. I'm the Energy and Environment Specialist with the town of Caledon. My portfolio of work is the town's corporate climate portfolio, which mostly falls on energy efficiency in our buildings, looking at our fleet, waste and water. I've been with the town for 9 years, approaching my 10th year next year. So it's been a while. And I just want to preface that I was involved in the investigation stage, so more of the beginning stage of this project. And then I covered a mat leave for another person in our team. So I was a bit in and out. So I definitely don't want to take the credit for this project and recognize my predecessor, Caitlin. She was our former manager who was heavily involved in this project, and then our project management staff and our facilities managers who were pretty key in this project.
Thank you, Christina. Let's go to the next slide. And I think you, I want to stress this piece because I really like the story about this, how this came along and how you guys are currently using this. Maybe give us a background around your target settings and how you guys are using this targets to define project success and a criteria that your teams of contractor consultant has to follow to deliver those projects. And how is this turning out to you, and how did it turn out for this project?
Sure, yeah. Maybe I'll touch on the previous slide and this slide at the same time. So yeah, essentially the way this project began is there's a facility needs assessment done. It identified that we needed a pool and to serve our Caledon East residents. Council fast-tracked that. We weren't set to have that pool until our population reached 100,000. Next year, we're forecast to be 90,000, so we're getting there. But it made sense to look at this expansion in addition to another one that was planned. So around that time when the design was going to begin in 2020, our existing corporate green building standard, which we had in place since 2012, was set to be updated. So our project management staff knew and they were aware that that standard was going to be updated. We have a pretty robust internal corporate energy team. So that's consisting of all of our facility staff. My division chairs that team, and then we've involved our project management staff that are also involved. So through that team, they're aware of our work plans and what we're doing. So I think that's pretty critical to this as well. And our project management staff actually approached us to say, could we use this expansion as an opportunity to trial our new corporate green building standard? We were moving away from a prescriptive standard, which previously required LEED Silver for any new town facilities and major expansions, to more of a performance-based approach. So we're saying this is the outcomes we want to see, and we'll allow for flexibility in how we get there. So essentially, we hired a consultant to help us with that corporate green building standard update. And they did energy modeling to land us on these targets here. So there's a series of archetype buildings that were developed based on the town's most frequent building types that we construct. So that's, you can see that as part of the table. So work, fire halls, community centers, admin buildings, and then ice rinks and swimming pools. And they had a bunch of different design options that they modeled for understanding what our new targets could be. So those targets actually modeled 5 different levels of performance. So looking at just constructing to code, to our previous standard, which was LEED Silver, a good practice model. So that would just be doing good energy efficiency practices. We actually landed that the good practice model is our level 1 that you see there. High performance, so that would be better insulation and air tightness, the highest efficiency mechanical and electrical equipment that's readily available commercially. So that's our level 2 targets. And then level 3 is reaching net zero. So it'd be utilizing some of the same envelope efficiencies as level 2, but mostly relying on electrification and then looking at renewable energy there. So we use this expansion as a trial to see what it could look like moving to a performance-based approach. The City of Mississauga's corporate green building standard was the closest model to where we wanted to go. So we actually utilized their level 1 targets for our modeling to see what it would take to reach their level 1 targets and what energy conservation measures we should look at for this expansion. And I would say the standard is really critical. It is council approved, so we cannot have any new town builds or expansions, renovations that do not meet this standard.
Awesome, great to hear that. Let's continue next slide, please, and I'll cover the next two with this conversation. This maybe can you quickly walk us, like you mentioned, you already talked about this new expansion, and then there's part of that project was to update the ice rink. So can you explain how these two projects kind of came together?
Sure, yeah. So the existing building was constructed in 1978. And then we added an ice rink in 2007 and then another ice rink. So we have a 2-pad facility there in 2010. And then this expansion was completed in 2023. So again, it tied those two projects together. So the design of this occurred concurrently with us updating our corporate green building standard. And we had some energy modeling work completed to understand what measures it would take to reach, using the City of Mississauga as inspiration, what it would take to get there. So yeah, the new expansion includes a pool, a gym, a library. The upper floor has community rooms and meeting spaces. We added a building automation system to this new expansion. The original side isn't connected yet, but we're exploring that. And then with that came new HVAC equipment, lighting, the in-floor heating, which is to the library, which is served from the heat recovery from the ice rink, and then the pool, the first heating sources from the heat recovery from the ice rink.
And that process of sort of, because you could have just built a new site and then left the existing as it is. Like, how did that thought process came about? What about we gonna use the heat from the existing plant and heat the pool? Like, how did that process came along? And anybody, I mean, in the audience who are looking to do these expansions, it would be good for them to sort of kind of pitch that idea, because this was an additional budget that you got to get it approved from the additional, I mean, from based on the new construction.
Yeah, so the refrigeration equipment, the existing refrigeration equipment at this building was set for end of life. So it would have been, I think, actually this year. So we went to council to seek approval to fast track that equipment replacement, so that we can upsize the equipment or increase the horsepower of it so that we could better serve the existing rinks, because there was some challenges with making the ice when the outdoor temperature would reach 25. So upsizing it for that purpose, also to serve a new outdoor rink that was set for this expansion as well. And then with that added benefit of being able to recover some of the heat to serve these new spaces.
Awesome. Kathryn, let's go to the next slide. Actually, we kind of maybe on this one, I think my interest is, I know there's a lot of parties involved. Like, how did you guys transition that vision of this is my target that I want to achieve to different people who are working to achieve different aspects of this complete project? Like, how did you make sure that vision is sort of processed to them through this design, construction, and commissioning phase?
Okay, so this is the part I was actually a part of, so I can speak to that. I think it was really just working together, collaborating on this. So we had meetings where we would bring in, like, our team was the lead on updating our corporate green building standard. Our project management office and facilities was the lead on this expansion. So we would meet all together. We would include our consultants in these meetings all together to discuss the feasibility of doing this. So bringing them on board and understanding that one of the most efficient ways to run the ice rink is to actually recover that heat and not losing it and sending it to other parts of the building where it can be used. So we did a little bit of education with our project management office and facilities and their consultants, and then showing them the actual modeling results. So we modeled what this could look like, what the potential savings could be, estimating what those capital costs could be. So I think having those numbers there and showing that education helped to bring them on board and show that there's actually a business case there. And then, as mentioned, our project management office and facilities team, we all sit on an internal corporate energy team. So I think that existing collaboration and education is important because we already have their buy-in to do energy efficiency measures and reduce our corporate emissions.
All right, I think I'm gonna take to the crux of this. Kathryn, can you go to the, we talked about this, your sort of energy savings profile and your targets energy model that you used. I'm gonna actually go to the next slide just to kind of get to the meat of this which is your heat recovery, right? Like, and maybe you can walk through these numbers, and then I think I like the following slide even better with some pictures. But talk us about your experience about this particular, and you touched on that about the concept of heat recovery that's been introduced to your team, but financially and everything else, like how do you guys were able to fund this?
Yeah, so that number you see there, so the 2.8 million, that's inclusive, like it includes other things in there. So it includes the actual refrigeration system replacement, the outdoor rink, the general contractor costs and contingencies, building permits. So it's kind of a packaged cost there. It may not be exactly that high to do the heat recovery itself, but it's a bit challenging to isolate what that financial cost was. And yeah, 90% of it was covered through development charge recovery and then 10% through the tax base. I think when we get to a lesson learned, this all kind of happened live, and with any new construct project for the town, timelines are always a challenge. It's always, we needed this yesterday. So I think planning for it in advance, we could have allowed for opportunities to explore more grant funding opportunities, but it was fully covered through DCs and through the tax base to get this project done. And just highlighting the role of senior management and council in this, we did take it to them for approval. So we did really have their buy-in to make this the most energy efficient and lowest emissions expansion that we could at the time. So they did approve this retrofit in advance and spending this additional capital that wasn't originally forecast for to complete this project.
That makes sense. And the next few slides kind of gives us an opportunity like to see some of the pictures that you were able to pull us through. So, and I think you touched on one of the points about these long pipe runs that you guys have to do it and could have been done better I mean, there's nothing you could do it because the building was originally built, right? So maybe you can help people understand that piece.
Yeah, so I guess a lesson learned for a new build would be you have more control of where you have your mechanical rooms. So trying to locate those as close as possible. It is a really long run from our ice rink mechanical room to the pool mechanical room. Again, a bit out of our control due to it being an existing building. So I'm sure there's efficiency losses. Those the glycol pipes there are definitely insulated. So efforts are made to make sure we're not reducing efficiencies there and have losses. But yeah, essentially there's hydronic heating, piping, and 3 heat exchangers located throughout the building, and the ice plant transfer heat between the ice plant boilers, pool, and the in-floor slab heating serving the library there.
Awesome. Kathryn, let's go to the slide in the view of the time. Oh, sorry, the savings. I want to show because that's really important. These are the actual results that you were able to accomplish, and I know there's still work in progress to fine tune that. So anybody who haven't seen these charts, so your blue dots is your actual metered consumption of electricity, and your red dots are a normalized baseline. So on the left-hand side is your electricity, right is your gas. Anytime your blue is below the red, that's your savings. And if we start with the gas, you could see that since the building has been commissioned, when you normalize for the new area that's been added, the new equipment that's been added, there's been still gas savings on this as a result of the heat recovery that you put into the system. So 23% six gas savings. And on the electricity side, and we'll talk about this as a lessons learned, is that we're still working with Christina, we're still trying to optimize the baseline because there's been a lot of equipment being added. There's a lot of area being added. It's not easy to adjust the baseline. So there's still work in progress on the electricity side to be, but the good story on the gas side is there's savings, real savings at the meter as a result of the project, even though there's net new area being added and the net new equipment being added.
Yep, definitely. And just one thing to note for electricity, so you see that increase happening August of this past year. So we've had some pressures from recreation to start our programming earlier for the ice rink. And I think that is a little bit of a disconnect, and something I want to work on internally is just showing the impact on our energy consumption when we open our ice rink earlier. I think at that time, the temperatures we were still like experiencing some heat waves. So that refrigeration equipment had to work a lot harder during that time. And you can see that really reflected here in the electricity consumption for those months.
Thank you. And then the most important, your lessons learned. So maybe you can walk us through those lessons learned. And we had a good conversation around what we do, and they always go back to the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think definitely to plan for our M&V plan early on, maybe like at the start of the project, so we can have a set and agreed upon way to verify savings. We're having challenges with verifying the savings right now. The energy savings slide, I know we didn't really go into it, but that was done based off of the as-built drawing. So it wasn't done based off of the actual energy consumption. So now that we have a year's worth of data with the building being operational, I'd really like to tie that in. So that's something we're looking at. Internally, we also run energy performance models for all of our facilities using Ret Screen Expert. So I'll be looking at that and what that model has to show us with this building. Working with Stephen Dixon and Adam Dixon on doing a non-routine adjustment for the expansion to see what those savings really could look like at this building. That was definitely a key lesson learned. And then we talked about just adding in those additional data points in the BAS, and then looking at sub-metering for this to inform that M&V further and just really isolate for these measures so we can understand the true impact of them and maybe where we could have improved. The other lesson learned that we briefly touched upon was just for a new build and looking at that run length of the pipes and designing it with intent and locating those mechanical rooms closer together so you don't have such a long run. I think one of the other lessons learned that we're actively doing right now is planning way ahead for a new facility. So we know that actually a new large community center is coming online in the next 2 years. So we've already started those conversations internally with our project management office, with facilities. I've actually put in a budget request for next year to do some energy modeling so we can understand what it would take to reach, I guess, level 3, which we're not targeted to go to until 2030 for that site. And then that better positions us to access grants like GICB or like the FCM funding as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Katrina, for your time. This is really helpful. I know I used a little bit more time, Kathryn. Sorry about that. I'll pass it back to you. And thanks again for all the panelists. This has been great information to share, and we hope to see the final results of these case studies and next time we present with the data that's real savings that people can attest to, and then they can look forward to implementing these strategies at their own facilities.
Yes, so thanks, Amandeep, and thanks to all of our panelists. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to share these stories with the group. You're sort of the pioneers moving down the path, and the lessons learned to share with others will be really, really helpful for everybody going forward. Just in the interest of time, I'm not going to take too much time on these slides here. I just wanted to point out a few things. There's definitely a lot of different considerations as you move towards implementation, particularly around electrification. Are you going to need an electric service upgrade, for example? How much is that going to cost? How is that going to be done? So this will be definitely one of the topics that we'll be exploring in 2025. Our members have asked specifically to cover this topic, so we'll get into that more in 2025, along with solar PV and all of the considerations there, and all the possibilities, and things that you should be considering when going down this path, particularly around the structural implications of the building. So will you need a structural upgrade? And if so, what are some other options that you could look at, such as ground mounted or car park solar, for example? So I'm not going to take up any time here in the interest of time, but then this will be a topic that we'll be exploring in 2025. And municipalities are pretty much sharing that this is where they're looking to get more support on the path to low carbon or net zero, around procurement, life cycle costing, the funding opportunities available. So this is sort of the general areas where people are needing help and support, and the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge will do what we can to facilitate that. I now want to turn it over to Gillian Henderson to walk us through some things to consider for new buildings and how to get the most out of our new buildings.
Thanks very much, Kathryn. And I too will do this fairly rapidly. So this is a new project that we're getting into, and we're hoping to get all of your participation and support for this as we go forward. Thanks, Kathryn. The Foundations for Net Zero Buildings project came out of our greening health, one of our sister programs, the Greening Healthcare, where we discovered as a number of public-private partnership hospitals were built in the last 10 years or so. And as we benchmarked their energy performance, we discovered that the new hospital performance was no better and sometimes significantly worse than existing hospitals. Now, of course, this makes no sense, because if we can't get new buildings right, it's going to make decarbonization and all of our efforts that much harder. So we have been funded to do research from the Natural Resources Canada Codes Acceleration Fund to look at the actual performance of newly constructed commercial and institutional buildings across Canada relative to the National Energy Code of Canada for buildings. So we're looking at new buildings in Manitoba, Alberta, BC, Ontario, Nova Scotia, possibly also Saskatchewan. And our first cohort is looking at commercial office and municipal administration buildings, hospitals and schools. And our second cohort will be looking at municipal buildings, multi-residential and post-secondary. We'll be identifying the top performing new buildings, what makes them exceptional, and uncovering how to improve the energy performance of new buildings. Next slide. So as a taste, this is what it looks like with we have the hospital data. And as you can see, this is benchmarking new hospitals. These have all been constructed after 2015. And as you can see, only 2 are better than an archetypal model of the NECB 2020 code. So the majority of the new hospitals are failing to meet these high efficiency standards. And we know, because we know the top 2 hospitals well, that they used best practice metrics from top performers that help them improve their modeling and targets and design specifications. Next. I won't dwell on this too much. You're all probably pretty familiar, the energy modeling requirements for NECB. So we've been using the archetypal building models to create an NECB archetype for different building types. And we're also looking at models from the City of Toronto's Toronto Green Standard program to test the before and after with the building models and where high performance metrics fit into this. Next slide. This is just an example of the kind of the best practice targets that we'll be developing. This is for acute care hospitals, whereas you can see it's a breakdown of the building systems to show you what the optimum performance or the optimum equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot for each building system might be if you just put together best practices from all sorts of hospitals. Next slide. So next steps and how you can get involved. We're going to be looking at best practices and metrics and sharing them. We're going to have workshops and charrettes with building owners for buildings under development and for existing recent buildings that are underperforming. We're going to be sharing things, and we're going to be developing guidance documents to help everybody working on new buildings to understand where are the places where you can lose the high performance, what are the best practices from everything to commissioning to operational input during the design phase. We'll be working directly with owners of new buildings to understand what's the differentiating factors. And what we're hoping to get from you is, if you have an administration building built after 2015, we'd like to include this in the research. And in 2025, we'll be looking at arenas, community centers, and fire halls. So thank you very much, Kathryn. I'd like, you can hand it over to our friends from Enbridge.
Thanks, Gillian. And I'd now like to turn it over to Enbridge Gas to talk about what they've been working on and where they're going and how they may be able to help everyone.
Well, good thing we're still here. Everybody can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
Awesome.
fine. Hi, Mark.
Awesome. So listen, I'll just get right into it, and then Andres can introduce himself when I hand things over to him. But my name is Mark Wilson. I'm the senior advisor on the Municipal Energy Solutions team at Enbridge Gas. Some of you on the call will know me. And I'm here to talk a little about Enbridge Gas, energy conservation, and in particular, the Municipal Energy Solutions team. Today, all of Enbridge Gas's offerings have the potential to lower emissions in the largest emitting sectors, buildings, transportation, and industry. It still starts with energy conservation, but today it does extend to clean energy technologies and renewable gases. So renewable natural gas is being produced from curbside organic waste by Enbridge Gas in the city of Toronto. We are blending hydrogen with natural gas for distribution in the city of Markham. We've added hydrogen vehicles and fueling infrastructure to our fleet, and we've also launched Enbridge Sustain that many of you may be familiar with. And these are all examples of how Enbridge Gas is embracing the energy transition and becoming a partner municipalities can leverage for climate action. But it doesn't end there. So next slide, please. So about Municipal Energy Solutions, I would consider us a concierge-like service for municipal climate action support. We facilitate access to historical DSM program participation data for municipalities, and we share research with you to support planning and reporting activities. We collaborate with you on larger initiatives like Durham Greener Homes and Mississauga's Climate Leaders program, for example. We will be one of Quest Canada's partners in delivering their Net Zero Community Accelerator program in Ontario in 2025. And we've allocated funds to partner with up to 7 municipalities next year that would see heat loss data and insights we've acquired from MyHeat Inc. available to homeowners and building owners in those municipalities to help encourage envelope energy retrofits. And we started a commercial pilot this year that will provide a no-cost audit of up to 12 municipal buildings to evaluate various electrification scenarios and make recommendations. Next slide. So we also deliver a municipal climate action offer, or MCAO, which provides a maximum of $10,000 to municipalities to support eligible climate action initiatives. In 2023, we provided more than 400,000 in funding, and we've exceeded 500,000 this year, and we still have a little time, a little budget left, but we are running out of time. We deliver a home energy retrofit orientation, or HERO workshop, which is delivered in partnership with Humber College to homeowners by a certified energy advisor and Humber College sustainability professor. And it helps homeowners better understand heating, cooling, and ventilation and how to undertake a home energy retrofit. City of Markham hosted a session just last night. We also deliver a Building Beyond Code offering in partnership with Building Knowledge Canada and EnerQuality. And it's delivered to municipal staff who would benefit from a better understanding of energy efficiency regulation in Ontario and the building science of energy efficiency. Next slide. So municipalities are commercial customers. All of your buildings are in theory eligible for all of our commercial offerings. And that's why my colleague Andres will speak about specific DSM programs later on. But Municipal Energy Solutions team, the Municipal Energy Solutions team really exists to support municipalities in a different way as well. We look to increase a municipality's capacity to tackle corporate emissions, but also influence climate change action more broadly within your borders. And we can do this by supporting a municipal activity that is already underway, so you can do more with it, or we can help create capacity for a municipality to undertake an activity it might not otherwise be able to undertake without partners. As a team, we continue to explore opportunities to add to what we call our toolbox. Next slide. Now, I think we all see the importance of energy conservation to the energy transition, and Enbridge Gas has been a leader in energy conservation programs for almost 30 years now. Our programs are approved by the Ontario Energy Board, and while the guiding principles of conservation programs have remained pretty consistent over 30 years, it is clear today that the aim of conservation is as much about climate change action as it is lowering energy bills. The OEB approved the current 3-year term in December 2022, and it was a huge boost for this team in particular. Not only did it include programs more aligned with municipal climate action objectives, but it also included an annual budget to fund the work that we do to support municipalities. And it's been in the range of $1.61.7 million indexed to inflation for 23, 24, 25. Next slide. In just a quick glance, you see here all of our conservation programs for all sectors, all customer types, both for new construction and retrofit projects. But what you don't see at a glance is just how our programming has evolved to better align with your climate action goals. Some of our programs are first, like commercial air tightness testing. For the first time, some of our longstanding programs are energy agnostic, meaning a commitment to natural gas is no longer an eligibility requirement. And for the first time, our residential whole home program doesn't offer incentives for natural gas appliances. So instead, we've been issuing rebate checks for electric heat pumps since January 1st of last year. We partnered with the government of Ontario in delivering 2 phases of its residential clean home heating initiative that installed electric heat pumps with smart controls in participating homes. And I think we'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't see the importance of heat pumps to the energy transition. Next slide. We're currently in the process of developing the next multi-year demand-side management plan that'll should commence in 2026. And while we have made strides in evolving some of our programs to better support the energy transition, we as a team led a survey between January and March of this year to capture your views and priorities concerning energy efficiency and conservation, with a particular emphasis on how to reduce natural gas consumption across multiple sectors. We had 42 municipalities participate, and in doing so, you ensured the municipal voice will be reflected in our next submission to the Ontario Energy Board this year and help shape that next generation of conservation programs. And that's it for me. From me, I'll turn it over to Andres to get into programming.
Thanks so much, Mark. Andres, just looking at our timing here,
Gotta
we're
be fast.
almost done. So I will, if you could go through it quickly, we will
Gotta be
100% share these slides so everyone can see the full presentation. Just wanted to note that we're getting awfully close to the end here.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Andres, and I specialize in working with municipalities across the GTA just to help them access energy efficiency incentives that support their sustainability goals. As we know, energy conservation plays a foundational role in the transition to electrification. So as we work towards a cleaner energy future, conserving energy is the first and most cost-effective step. Incentive programs are designed to support these efforts, helping municipalities adopt energy-efficient technology while easing the upfront investment. Whether it's upgrading existing systems or piloting innovative solutions, conservation complements electrification by ensuring the most efficient use of resources. Next slide. This just shows you a brief overview of our program from 2023 to 2025. Respecting the time that's left, I'll just concentrate on 2025. So some of the key themes for 2025 will be to optimize boiler systems and also focus on controlled projects and hybrid heating systems. Starting in 2025, we will no longer be supporting your typical boiler incentives. Next slide. So the reason why we won't be supporting boiler replacements next year is because of a directive from the government of Canada. Starting next year, boilers will have to have a minimum efficiency of 90%. And so because our program focuses on supporting our customers to take on energy efficiency projects, if the standard boiler for next year is a condensing boiler, we can't really support that. So that's why next year our focus will be more on control projects and hybrid heating systems. Next slide. So I won't get too much into the case study, but if you do have any technical questions, feel free to email me. Mine and Mark's email is at the end, at the very last slide. But this year, the hybrid RTU offer was very popular. And this is an example of a project that we did for a municipality in Ontario. We provided $40,000 in incentives, and they installed 4 hybrid RTUs. In this case, we look at the base case or the baseline as the customer replacing a like-for-like replacement, but instead of going with that route, they decided to go with hybrid RTUs. So if you go to the next slide, this just shows more or less the, I guess, the benefits of going with a hybrid RTU that you can take a look at later. And next slide. And this is the information that we do need in order to process an application like this. A lot of this is available through trend data. If not, then we should start monitoring just so that we can set up a baseline, assign a gas profile to those units, and then capture those gas savings through our calculations. And then next slide. And that's it. So with respecting time, here's our information. If there's any more information you have, just email us. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Andres. That was amazing. We will definitely share these slides on our website so folks can go through them and look at them in more detail for sure. There's
Sorry,
other
just
funding opportunities.
Just to chime in here, I just wanted to note that phone number is completely wrong for me. I didn't pick that up, so not that anyone calls anyone anymore, but please reach out to mark.wilson@enbridge.com. Thank you.
And we can update that before I post it.
Sure, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. Just a reminder, there's other funding opportunities available, which folks can look at their leisure. Just a little bit of wrap up here, which I won't get too much into. But again, working, accelerating savings in 2025, hoping to tackle all of these different topics and hoping to have others join us on our journey. And I would like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your stories with everyone. And yeah, so hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.